Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video on myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. Ukraine War News Update, the second part thereof for the 25th of March 2025. I'm going to do a short military aid. I was going to join it in with the geopolitical stuff, but I'm actually going to do a mapping update, and I might be doing a live with Greg Terry later to talk about everything that's been going on today, including, I guess, well, there are hearings taking place right now that are fascinating concerning the Signal messaging app scandal, but also there's been a breakthrough in negotiations. It looks like there's been an agreement for a ceasefire in the Black Sea, which pertains to what I'm just about to talk about, actually, and also with regard to striking energy infrastructure as well. Okay, so what do we have on military aid front? The EU with the Rearm Europe plan, although I think some have called for that to be renamed as Readiness 2030. The Europe plan has been presented, which involves mobilising over 800 billion euros to strengthen security and support Ukraine, according to European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. That is going to be interesting to see how that pans out. A group of influential Republican senators has sent a letter to the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio urging him to push European nations to use over $300 billion in frozen Russian central bank assets as leverage against Russia, according to Reuters. Now, I mean, the pertinent point here is that the US doesn't have control over that. Most of that is coming from Europe, hence the asking Marco Rubio as a Secretary of State to put pressure on Europe to release that. Now, Europe's been looking into this, and they have actually quite recently decided against doing that for a number of reasons. So I don't know that that'll have any effect, but I guess it's good that these people are getting involved. That is, as you can see there, Senator Lindsey Graham as one of those signatories. Denmark has pledged $140 million to companies investing in Ukraine's defence sector. So under the new initiative, the Danish government will introduce a state-backed guarantee through the Export and Investment Fund of Denmark. So that's trying to motivate Danish companies to invest in the Ukrainian defence industry. We also hear that Ukrainian enterprises have mastered the production of spare parts for the American M113 armoured personnel carriers. They have a whole bunch of these, including the YPR 765 version from Denmark, a slightly updated version. But there are, I think, quite a lot of these. We've seen them when Andrew did a few days of loss lists recently. A lot of M113s were on that, which indicates that they're using them widely. And they have been since the beginning of the war. These are fairly obsolete these days. Well, I say obsolete. They are still being used around the world because they're just, pretty decent at getting from A to B and can be used in a number of different ways. So they're quite numerous around the world, and that's why Ukraine has a lot of them. And so making their own parts is going to really help with the sustainment of those vehicles. Euromaidan Press reports that Ukraine's mad scientists have married the Soviet R-73 with Western missiles and a hybrid air defense system. This could be what Commission was talking about, the advisor to Zelensky, who is, he came from the railways first of all, and then moved into being the strategic industries minister, and then the advisor to Zelensky on strategic industries. He talks about there having been a new weapon that's been tested in this last week. Could be this. This looks pretty much like the UK version that is basically one of these cargo containers that's been turned into an air defense system using these R-73. These are air-to-air missiles. Of course, when you use them, like I've said before, in their ground-to-air mode, then you are going to lose a lot of range because they have to use a lot of energy to get up to height and to get up to speed, whereas if you release them from an airplane, they're already at speed and usually at height. So these they've got a lot of these missiles, and that's why they have been obviously looking at using them themselves in these hybrid ways, and they tasked the UK with coming up with a system which uses these too, and the UK has started giving them these systems, but I don't think it's the one mentioned here. Now, the 3rd Separate Assault Brigade has developed a turret-like platform capable of firing both Soviet R-73 missiles and Western alternatives, so that's really excellent. You basically want to be firing that which you have the most of. So that's why you see so many RPG-7 warheads on these FPV drones. They've just got gazillions of these around the world. Okay, Ukraine's digital minister Mikhailo Fedorov gave details about the new marine drone Katran. Could it be this that Commission was talking about? Quote, information about missions is classified, but it has become a real game changer at sea. He said it's equipped with torpedoes, a minigun, machine gun, and manpads that can travel over 1,000 kilometers. So this is like your Magura V5, but the new version. Torpedoes, manpads. Manpads portable, or in fact, it's not man portable, it's drone portable, drone pads. Drone portable air defense systems, machine gun, minigun, etc., etc. Really good range. Now, this is linked to, as I hinted earlier, the negotiations taking place today. So, if Ukraine and Russia have agreed not to go to war at sea, to have a ceasefire on the Black Sea, then of course this is rendered, well, not impotent, but it is, you know, they're not going to be able to use it. But of course, it depends how long these ceasefires last, right? We'll have to keep an eye on the Black Sea, obviously, to see whether they are able to maintain both sides that ceasefire. So it could be that they've developed this and then it's not going to be used in battle, or maybe it has already been used. I don't know. An explosion has taken place at the Czech plant producing shells for Ukraine. I hope that's not sabotage. Powerful blast hit the a factory in the Czech town of Borzina, known for manufacturing artillery shells for the Ukrainian armed forces. This isn't the first incident. Back in 2014, Russian GRU agents blew up an ammunition depot in Rechice, killing 2 people. Coincidence, or is the Russian hand at work again? We don't know, but that has happened. And this is evidence, so it is claimed, that the Ukrainians are receiving a fairly decent amount of equipment coming over the Romanian border. Russian Telegram channels are complaining that military aid from the US and Germany is pouring in across the Romanian border. You can see a whole bunch of equipment here supposedly on the way to Ukraine from Romania. So there is that. Now, moving on to the issue about buying American weaponry from a European standpoint. I've been talking about this argument over F-35s. My opinion is that Europe needs some F-35s for that capability. We already have some in our stocks. And UK, for example, our Air Force, I think, already has F-35s. I would suggest, fulfilling what we have to already, and then really thinking long and hard about using European aircraft, and maybe cancelling orders. But we certainly need some F-35. Now, there are different arguments that are taking place with regard to how dependent on the US they are. Like, is there a kill switch, or what would that kill switch look like? It's not the case of like turning them off in midair, but if you are not able to securely get software upgrades, if spare parts are hard to come by, or whatever, the US can turn off maintenance maybe, so there are these kind of soft kill switches. Anyway, Edward Hunter Christie, seeing this report, says Europe clearly needs to buy non-American as a policy. Danish authorities have confirmed that the F-35 spare parts kept in Skridstrup Air Base can be moved away on a whim, as they are US owned. This was confirmed in the aftermath of the Danish spare parts being sent to Israel against Danish policy. So I've not heard about this, but evidently Israel needed some spare parts for F-35s, and there were Danish ones that were provided by the US, and they have, I presume, have been moved from Denmark without the Danish say-so, effectively, which then gives you this indication that the US do have this ultimate control over a lot of this stuff. Now, the argument against that is that these are collaborative projects. F-35 is not so much, we in Europe could have a soft kill switch on the F-35 being used, right? There are components that come from Europe for these, arguably. And so it was interesting when I was reporting about the F-35s the other day, and I said Rheinmetall CEO Armin Papiger had said we need to fulfill, from German point of view, we need to fulfill the contract for F-35s. And I didn't mention it, but in my head I was like, I bet Rheinmetall makes some of those components. That's why he's saying that. And lo and behold, and I'm so frustrated because I thought that and I didn't say it. And lo and behold, Rheinmetall announces that the installation of the F-35 Center fuselage production tooling from Northrop Grumman will begin in the next few days. Oh, well, there you go. Rheinmetall are indeed involved in the manufacturing of F-35. So, of course, he would be up for the fulfillment of that F-35 contract for Germany. And just finally, the US shares nuclear targeting information with the UK for all of Russia. So again, on the same subject, how dependent on the US are, or is the UK, particularly in the domain of nuclear deterrence, whereby our nuclear missiles are, well, the maintenance of those missiles is done by the US. Some claims that that we can't use them without the US involvement. How much independence is there? And I think the general idea is that we are independently able to use them. There isn't we don't have to ask permissions, so to speak. However, it may be that we just wouldn't be able to target with them. The US shares nuclear targeting information with the UK for all of Russia. So if we wanted to fire at Russia, we would be dependent on the US for targeting. And finally, in a indication that Europe is taking defense seriously, that we are looking at Russia and thinking, could be a bit of a problem country, that one. The Netherlands is planning on increasing its army from 70,000 to 100,000 by 2030 and create the prerequisites for a further increase to 200,000 if necessary, and I think that's by 2035. So that is a big move from the Dutch. We've seen that the Germans are looking hard at personnel, Polish. We know that the Danish have changed sort of conscription rules with regard to taking in women, trying to increase the pool of people. And the Baltics have looked at, I think, changing some of their conscription scenarios and whatnot. So Europe is taking the threat very seriously. Are they doing enough? Are they doing it quickly enough? Where's money coming from? All of that, obviously. Still, open questions and issues. But that's enough from me for this topic for today. Nice quick one for you. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.